Hi, and welcome to Mission Control Houston. And welcome with me today, Dina Contella, one of our Flight Director team members for the International Space Station, a veteran spacewalk or EVA officer before she became a Flight Director, and somebody who's been working with the troubleshooting activities on the spacesuit that we had trouble with on July 16 when Luca Parmitano had a lot of water fill up in his helmet. And she's been working very closely with the team that's pulling together the troubleshooting activities and trying to figure out exactly what happened there. Dina, even though this was a Labor Day weekend, the space station crew did do quite a bit of work on Saturday, primarily troubleshooting the problem with the helmet and the water supplies that got into the helmet from the spacesuit. The spacewalk was cut short, but everybody got inside safe, and now we're trying to figure out what happened. What did the crew do over the weekend, this weekend?
Okay, well, just to back up a little, prior to this weekend, the whole team has been trying to figure out what the source of the problem could be. And so the team developed some procedures on the ground to change out some components of the suit. And the idea would be you would change some of the components out and then retest the suit out to see if the water continues to go into the helmet. And so the team worked very hard on that. There's essentially the problem is probably located in this one area of the life support system. That's the backpack of the spacesuit. And there are some valves that are associated with both the water system and the oxygen system, kind of in an intimately close area to each other in proximity, such that water could get into the oxygen vent loop system. And so the team identified specifically one valve and also a filter that could have been the cause of the issue. And additionally, there was another valve that is sort of easy to change out there, not a valve, but a component called the gas trap. And so on the ground, the technicians and the engineers and the ops team all got together and got the procedures ready. And then what the crew did this weekend was change out of that valve, which if that valve was a problem, it could have caused the flooding. Also, the filter, which if it was clogged, that could have caused the flooding. And then, like I said, the gas trap. And after the first component and filter were changed out, we did a screening where we tested the suit out, buttoned it all up as if it was preparing for going EVA, and then we checked to see if water was still coming in the helmet, which it was. And then we took the gas trap out and put a new one in, and then we screened that also just to make sure. We didn't think that was the cause of the issue, but we wanted the gas trap on the ground anyway. So anyway, we did all that troubleshooting and we got water in the helmet both times. So we have not isolated the exact component that failed yet on Luca's suit. But we did a lot of good work this weekend by recovering those items. We bagged them all up for return on the Soyuz. And so on the ground, the team will be able to take really close-up photos and kind of pick apart the different materials that might be in those components and check for mechanical failure and those types of things. For example, the gas trap, we didn't think it was the source of the problem, but it has a really fine mesh screen on it. So if there was a kind of anything interesting in the water that was going through the gas trap, it's water and gas combined, then that might collect some evidence that would be on the screen. So we did a lot of great work this weekend, although we haven't specifically isolated that exact cause. We're really excited to get some of that hardware back on the ground.
Okay. So you're doing everything, it sounds like, one thing at a time to try and isolate what's going on. Has it been tough to pinpoint this issue?
It is actually pretty hard. There are a few items that are in close proximity to each other, and so trying to figure out which one of those it could be has been one of the issues. But it's also not, you can't really drive your EMU over to the gas station and have the mechanic take a look at it because really the technicians are really experts at this very intricate type work that it takes to work in the life support system, and all of their work is done here on the ground without zero-G type of hindrance to having small little screws and other things. They have a lot on the ground that they can do that we don't necessarily easily can translate basically onto on-orbit activities. So, for example, we have one component of the suit. It's a combination of fan, water separator, and pump. And that particular item would be great if we could get that particular component back on the ground too, but it's much more difficult to change out. So it's hard to pinpoint the issue when you can't just go and grab items off the suit and then have your experts take a look at them. It takes a lot of effort to get some of those components out.
Well, and the crew members have a lot of training in how to operate their suits, but maybe not so much, and some in how to maintain them, but maybe not as much in troubleshooting. And so you're trying to give them really good procedures to get all this done, and everything's a little bit harder to do in zero G too, right?
Exactly. And so just as an example, the work that we did over the weekend, there's some very small, tiny screws that we didn't want to have get lost. So we set up some mesh over the end of a vacuum cleaner to try to catch some of those components. But the development of all that type of stuff, you don't want the crew necessarily to try to do it themselves. We'd like to try to give them the best techniques possible since they've never laid eyes on the hardware. So trying to translate what these expert technicians are doing on the ground into something that can be done in zero G is just something that takes quite a bit of work.
Okay. Well, now there's a formal mishap investigation board that's been formed to look at this issue. So why do we need the crew to do all this troubleshooting now?
Okay, well, the Mishap Investigation Board is kind of an independent review, but space station ops continue every day. So the crew is doing science every day, and there's vehicles that are coming and going, and there's a lot of potential contingencies or off-nominal situations that could crop up that would require a spacewalk. And so should one of these crop up, we would like to be ready to say that we understand what the failure is and what we would do in case the water was starting to come into the helmet again, such that we would be able to say we might be able to go out and perform an EVA in an off-nominal situation. So while the Mishap Investigation Board is working that, at the same time we're trying to understand how we could get to the point where we could say we could go and perform another EVA, working on the operation procedures for the crew in case it happened again. And additionally, we're working with the Mishap Investigation Board on the gathering of the evidence and bringing it to the ground. This is good information that they need as well as the rest of us. I'd say maybe the space station team in general is all trying to collect the same evidence, and then the Mishap Investigation Board is hand in hand wanting that same information. So working hand in hand, but they're doing more of an independent review.
Okay. To the layman, it seems a little strange that you'd put the air and water systems so close together that they could cross over. Can you explain a little? Is that just because you have to shrink things down so small for use in space?
Well, they're intimately tied together because the spacesuit is cooled by water, and so we feed water into something called a sublimator, and the sublimator forms when the water hits the sublimator in a vacuum, it forms a sheet of ice, and then that ice sublimates off. It basically turns to vapor immediately, and that whole process gives the suit cooling. And in addition to cooling the components of the suit, it's used to cool the crew member's body off. Uh, and you can see here there's water in the helmet. This is basically what Luca was experiencing, but this is us inside the cabin doing some testing here. But back on the sublimator, so that particular loop, it cools off the oxygen that the crew member's breathing as well, and it condenses. For example, your breath has a little bit of moisture in it, and your sweat, and that kind of thing. So the sublimator helps to condense that out like an air conditioner a little bit. So you can see how the vent loop and the oxygen loop have to be intimately tied together. And also you could see bubbles that would occur potentially in your cooling loop system, and you want to get the bubbles out, and hence the gas trap. So there's a few ways in which they're tied together, and we have to use the water to cool the oxygen, and we use a water separator specifically to keep those two separate, water and oxygen. In this particular case, though, the water separator, I guess theorized that the water separator allowed flooding to go into the vent loop in this particular case, but what the root cause is still unknown.
Okay. And we were looking at that picture of the helmet, and basically the air that circulates in the helmet comes over the back of the head, and that's what we were looking at there.
Exactly.
So,
And so water actually was basically entering at that point and coming up over the top of the head in this particular case. It also comes around the sides. It has to do with the geometry of the vent pad.
okay. So how big of a team is working on this? Sounds like you guys didn't get a full Labor Day weekend.
Well, that's true. So we've been working on this for quite some time over the course of several weeks. I'd say the majority of the team is really the spacesuit team, Of course, other disciplines are affected, like our life support system officers and things like that. But our operations team and our engineering team and all those expert space technicians, as I mentioned, have been working several weeks in a row, and we really wanted to give everyone Labor Day weekend off. But unfortunately, the way the crew scheduling and all of our science worked out, we really wanted to do those operations on Saturday. So we did have a lot of the key individuals here in the control center on Saturday, and then we had to do a little bit of, maybe I'd call it telework or work from home on Sunday. But we did try to give the folks Monday off.
Well, that's good. Let's change gears here a little bit, and I know you're not as in the middle of the preparations for the cargo vehicle departure that's coming up tomorrow, but can you just kind of give us a broad overview while we got you here of what it's like to get a cargo vehicle like HTV ready to go?
Okay, well, today, as a good example, as I walked up, I heard you talking about the fact that we have Luca right now in the vestibule. Essentially, you need to get everything prepped and ready to go between HTV and the space station, our Japanese cargo vehicle and the space station. So there's this area called the vestibule in between where you have jumpers and hoses and um, things that would allow you to supply air and power and data in between the two vehicles. So basically, you need to close all that out so that HTV can depart. And additionally, you have to install some boxes. I know they're doing that today as well, where these are boxes that would have interfered with the translation in between the two vehicles and taking cargo in and taking cargo out. But we want to reinstall those. Those boxes will help control the bolting or the unbolting in this particular case for the release. And so I know the crew is doing that today as well. And then overnight, the ground will do some preparations for the demate as well. And then, of course, tomorrow is the release. And the crew I know has been practicing as well for the release. It's not as big an operation as the rendezvous and the capture, but it still requires some preparation work on their part.
And while all this is going on, we're also getting ready for three of the crew members to come home. So tell us a little bit about what it's like on board with departure of a cargo vehicle, getting ready to bring yourself home as well for those three crew members.
Well, they've also been doing a lot of packing, and they've still got some time to go. But I know they have a drill tomorrow to practice their descent, essentially. And Chris, I know, has packed up most of his stuff, but there's maybe a couple of last-minute items. And as I understand it, talking with their lead flight director, there's sort of bittersweet. They're very happy to be returning, but at the same time, they don't want to leave space station. So I know that they're in excellent spirits, though, and they've been a really awesome crew. So we're looking forward to the next crew, but this cruise has been special for us for sure.
Oh, great. Dina Contella, a flight director and key member of the team that is troubleshooting the spacesuit problem. Thanks again for joining us today, and good luck with your continued work on figuring out what's going on there.
Thank you very much. Hope we solve the problem soon.
Great. Thanks, Dina.